saw a familiar face walking on the avenue. Both surprised by the way we looked. The years had changed us too. We smiled and both embraced.
Hello again. Welcome to another Gung Ho show. It's April 10, 2023. This is the second show I'm doing today with my good friend Jeff Sussman. The topic is Sin City gangsters, the beginning and I guess maybe the end of the mob controlling that city. And we were just off camera talking a little bit about Frank Sinatra. Pretty blue eyes?
Pretty blue eyes, yeah. So, you know, we talked about Mo Dalitz in the previous program, who owned the Desert Inn. And in 1951, Frank Sinatra's career was going no place. He was in the doldrums. You know, here was a guy who used to get thousands and thousands of dollars for appearing in a nightclub, and he was doing nightclub gigs for $200 or $300. His career was going no place. So some mobster friends of Sinatra and Mo Dalitz called Mo Dalitz at the Desert Inn, asked him if he could give Sinatra a job singing at the Desert Inn. This is in 1951. And Dalitz gave him a job and said, you know, you can sing here for 3 months, 4 months, whatever you need to do. And Sinatra was always beholden to Mo Dalitz for that, and would do whatever Mo Dalitz ever asked him to do as a favor. But, you know, Sinatra's career was started by the mob in Hoboken, New Jersey. And the two biggest mobsters in New Jersey were partners, were a man named Willie Moretti and a guy named Longies Willman. And Willie Moretti was friends with Sinatra's mother and helped to get Sinatra singing engagements. And, you know, the mob doesn't do favors just for the sake of doing favors. They expect something in return. So they owned Frank Sinatra, in effect. They owned his career because they got him started. And, you know, after his singing engagement at the Desert Inn, he wanted to get the part of Maggio in the movie From Here to Eternity, because he felt that would completely revitalize his career. Now, the part had already been given to the actor Eli Wallach, who was appearing in a play on Broadway, and he didn't want to leave the play for the movie. So it was an opening, and Sinatra wanted very desperately to get this part. Now, the movie was produced by Columbia Pictures, and its president was a man named Harry Cohn, who was also a gangster. He had taken a lot of money from the mob, and they had done favors for him, and he did favors for them. And, you know, when the mob was extorting the Hollywood studios for labor peace, they left him alone because he was one of them. Now, he didn't want to give Sinatra the part. He didn't like Sinatra because, you know, he liked some of the women that Sinatra liked, and Sinatra was getting Harry Cohn's girlfriends. And in order to be in a Columbia picture, you had to sleep with Harry Cohn. And if you didn't sleep with Harry Cohn, you didn't get the part in the movie.
Oh my God!
And he was known as the originator of the casting couch. And so Sinatra realized that he needed someone from the mob who was friends with Harry Cohn to get him the part. So he called a friend of his at one of the theatrical agencies who was a close friend of Frank Costello. Frank Costello didn't know Frank Sinatra personally at that time, but this guy asked him if he would please call Harry Cohn and get him to give Sinatra the part in the movie, and he did eventually, and Sinatra's career took off. Well, in researching my book Sin City Gangsters, I discovered a lot of interesting things about Sinatra. So, for example, there was a hotel casino called the Cal Neva Lodge, which was on the California-Nevada border. The casino part was in Nevada because gambling was legal in Nevada, and the hotel part was in California. And there were two owners of the Cal Neva Lodge who wanted to be quiet. They had frontmen working for them. The two owners were Joseph Kennedy, President Kennedy's father, and Sam Giancana, head of the outfit in Chicago. And Sam Giancana was, you know, persona non grata in Vegas. He would be in the Black Book, which kept all gangsters out of the casinos. So he hired Frank Sinatra as his front man for the Cal Neva Lodge. And Joseph Kennedy had one of his business partners from Boston as his front man. I don't remember the man's name. But Sinatra was a very hot-tempered guy who had a very short temper. And he was fooling around, or trying to fool around, with one of the waitresses one night. And her husband was a deputy sheriff who came by and saw what was going on and told Sinatra to leave his wife alone and don't bother her anymore. And Sinatra backed off, saying, fine, I'm not going to do anything. But the next time the guy came to pick up his wife, Sinatra was fooling around again, or trying to fool around with the guy's wife, and the guy lost his temper and belted Sinatra and knocked him to the ground and picked up his wife, and they left. About 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, the guy is driving on the highway with his wife, going out to dinner at night, and a car is coming right at them in the other direction, drove them off the road. The deputy sheriff was ejected from the car. He was killed.
Oh, my God.
And his wife was badly injured, but she survived. His wife and their family went to the sheriff and to the police, and they all believed that Sinatra had ordered this to happen. But they could never get any evidence to really prove it.
The car that involved just disappeared.
It just disappeared. They couldn't find it. So then on another occasion, the head of the gambling commission in Nevada came to the Cal Neva Lodge to make sure that they weren't skimming and that everything was going. And Sinatra blew his top and threw the guy out of the casino, yelled and screamed, cursed at him, threw him out, wouldn't let him come in. So to get even, the gambling commissioner, they rescinded the gambling license of the Cal Neva Lodge, so they could no longer have gambling there. And that was what the place was built for. So Sam Giancana was furious because he had invested $450,000 to build this place after World War II, and Joseph Kennedy had put in a similar amount. And now they couldn't have gambling there. And Sam Giancana is heard on a tape saying that goddamn Sinatra, if he could only keep his mouth shut, none of this would have happened. And he issued a contract on the life of Sinatra. And Sinatra heard about it, and he called Meyer Lansky in New York, and he said, can you please do anything to help me? You know, Giancana wants to kill me. And he said, I'll see what I can do. And Lansky called Giancana, and they said, okay, you know, we'll forget about it for the time being anyway. So Sinatra goes back to Beverly Hills, and he's in the Beverly Hills Hotel Polo Lounge with Dean Martin and 3 other guys celebrating Dean Martin's birthday. And they're drunk, and they're carrying on, and they're cursing and yelling. There are 2 very staid CEOs of major corporations in the booth next to them. And they asked Sinatra and his group if they could just hold it down a little bit and stop cursing so much. Well, Sinatra was indignant at this. He picked up a telephone and whacked the guy in the side of his head, you know, a big, solid telephone. And the guy was lying on the floor unconscious. So Sinatra and Dean Martin and their pals quickly exited the Polo Lounge. The guy was in a coma for 2 weeks. And Sinatra was hiding out after that in Palm Springs or Palm Desert, and Dean Martin was also hiding someplace. And Sinatra's calling his people in Los Angeles every day to find out because if this guy dies, Sinatra could be charged with manslaughter. So finally the guy comes out of a coma, and his wife and his daughters and his brother, they decide that they're going to sue Sinatra for this. But they got so many threats against their lives that they never went forward with the lawsuit. So Sinatra loved to gamble, and he was a regular at I forgot the casino, and he would gamble there, and he would lose all the time. He loved blackjack. Blackjack was his favorite game, and he one night he was down about $50,000, and he already owed the hotel more than $50,000. And his modus operandi was, if I win, I'll collect. If I lose, I'm not paying off. And because he sang there and brought in so many people, he felt that he could get away with this. But this was a hotel that had just been bought by Howard Hughes. And Howard Hughes said, anyone who's indebted to the hotel for gambling has to pay off their gambling markers, or we're not giving them any more credit. So the manager of this hotel, who still owned points in it, refused to deal with Sinatra. And Sinatra was furious, and he demanded that they call the manager and that he be...
Sinatra wanted more credit?
He wanted more credit.
And he had already lost about $50,000?
He had lost about $50,000, and the hotel wouldn't wake up the manager. But finally, at 5 o'clock in the morning, they woke him up, and he agreed to meet Sinatra in the lounge of the hotel. And I was just looking for the name, the Sands, I'm sorry. It was the Sands Hotel and Casino. And the manager was a big, tough guy who was connected to the mob. And he met Sinatra in the garden room lounge of the Sands Hotel Casino. And Sinatra's cursing and yelling at this guy. And he's sitting with his friend and bodyguard, Julie Rizzo. And the manager says, I'm getting out of here. I don't need to tolerate this. You know, you're an idiot. And then Sinatra becomes infuriated. And he says, what are you, frightened of me? And the guy sits down again and he says, I'm not frightened of you. You're just a little punk singer. And then Sinatra goes berserk. He said, you're nothing but a dirty Jewish kike.
Oh, my God.
And the guy picked up Sinatra by his collars and punched him in the face and knocked out his 4 front teeth. Sinatra says to his bodyguard, Julie Rizzo, get him, get him. And Julie says, I'm not having any part of this. Puts up both of his hands like this. And because the manager had been known to kill some people and leave them in the desert. And Sinatra then picked up a chair and threw it at him, but the chair instead hit a security guard in the hotel. So while I was interviewing for this book, I was interviewing a man named Tony Napoli, whose father was a big, I forgot what family he was connected with. His father was the biggest bookmaker on the East Coast, a man named Jimmy Napoli, known as Jimmy Knapp. And his father had gotten him this job as manager of just the casino in the Sands Hotel. And Tony Napoli told me that he had to drive Sinatra to an oral surgeon to get his lips sewn up, and then Sinatra was going to fly back to Los Angeles to have his teeth fixed. And before he did that, he drove his golf cart through the plate glass window of the Sands because he was so angry with them. And he got back to Los Angeles, and he called Jimmy Knapp's father, Tony Knapp's father, Jimmy Knapp, and he said he wanted something done to this guy, the manager. And Jimmy Knapp said to him, you can't touch him. He's one of us. You understand what I mean? He's one of us. He's untouchable. I mean, he's signing your checks, and they're checks for hundreds of thousands of dollars, but he's the one signing your checks. Look, he's your boss, and he's one of us. You can't touch him. He's untouchable. And so Sinatra couldn't do anything. But he never went back to the Sands again after
Yeah,
that. He
you
refused
just
to have
mentioned-
anything to do with that. So instead, he made a contract with Caesar's Palace. And he had the same problem at Caesar's Palace. The FBI was surveilling Caesar's Palace because of the skim there. And they saw Sinatra was playing blackjack, and he owed Caesar's Palace about $50,000. And he wanted a marker for the same amount. So the FBI told the casino manager to call the overall manager and tell him what was going on with Sinatra, because the FBI didn't like Sinatra either. And so the manager came down, and he and Sinatra actually got into a fist fight. And they're rolling around on the floor, trading punches with each other. And Sinatra has his hands on the guy's throat. He's about to strangle him. The guy pulls out a gun and puts it to Sinatra's forehead. And Sinatra says, "You're nothing but a crazy heap." And he leaves, and he never comes back to Caesar's Palace for 4 years because of that. He was just an incredibly obnoxious human being.
But how did they treat him, you know, as far as the money he made there?
Oh, they loved it that he made so much money. He brought in money for them. But their ultimate attitude was the singers are a form of entertainment. And you know, they bring in some people, but people basically come to gamble. That's the attraction, is gambling. The entertainers are sort of ancillary. You know, we could probably get by without them. But one entertainer can be replaced by another.
But do you know how much they were paying Sinatra? Any rumors?
$400,000 a week.
How long did that go on for?
It would go on for like 6 weeks at a time.
How many years?
At the Sands, it went on for several years, and then, you know, when the guy who he had the run-in with at Caesar's Palace left Caesar's Palace, they invited Sinatra back, and they paid him even more money, and they made him the top entertainer for about 2 or 3 years at Caesar's Palace.
He became part of the Rat Pack, and they call him.
Yeah, that was at the Sands Hotel and Casino.
So all those guys were on the payroll too.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people didn't realize. They thought all of that Rat Pack stuff was extemporaneous, you know, that they just ad-libbed it. But everything that they did was written out by Joey Bishop, the comedian. He wrote out all their skits and their lines for them, and so
They were very popular.
extremely popular. So then I also found out that Sam Giancana issued a second contract on Frank Sinatra's life, because Sinatra had told Sam Giancana that because of his close relationship with the Kennedy family, he would be able to control Robert Kennedy, and Robert Kennedy would not go after the mob. Well, as you probably know, Kennedy brought more indictments against the mob than any attorney general in history, more than 400 indictments. And the mob hated him. And Sinatra kept assuring Giancana that he could, you know, make all of this go away. And Kennedy hated Sam Giancana, and he had him followed out in the open 24 hours a day. I mean, the guy's 10 feet away from him, following him all the time. And it was driving Sam Giancana nuts. And he blamed Sinatra for this, because Sinatra couldn't control Robert Kennedy. So he issued a second contract on Sinatra's life. But Sam Giancana was having an affair with the singer Phyllis McGuire of the McGuire Sisters. And she loved Frank Sinatra's music, because when they would make love, they would listen to Frank Sinatra ballads on their record player. And she said, you know, we can't kill him because we love making love to his music. And so he said, okay. And instead, he opened a casino restaurant outside of Chicago. And he went to Sinatra and he said, "You and all your friends have to perform here for nothing."
Oh my God.
And each of you has to perform for 2 weeks for nothing. So it was Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Eddie Fisher,
But Joey Bishop, was he involved?
He wasn't a performer. He wasn't a singer. He was a comedian. He may have gone and done some stand-up comedy there. I don't know. So they did this, and this went on for a number of months. and the casino was raking in tons of money. And when the entertainment stopped, people stopped coming to the to this particular Chicago casino. So Sam Giancana burnt the place down afterwards, just to collect the insurance money. But that was Sinatra's two encounters of just avoiding being killed by the mob.
When you use that term that he's one of us, I guess the message to Sinatra, and you're not.
Exactly.
It's like,
Yeah, actually, that's what Tony Napoli said to me. He said, my father said to Frank Sinatra, he's one of us, and you're not. You're just a singer. Remember that. You're just a singer.
all right, he's with us. That's the, yeah,
Right.
all right. We're going off here, but the thing about the mob getting involved in the schemes of whatever it was, the government wanted to use the mob to kill Castro. That really happened, right?
Yes.
And who was in charge? Who on the mob side was in charge of that?
Well, it was Sam Giancana, Johnny Roselli, and Santo Trafficante, who was the mob boss of Florida.
You said that Sam got killed, right?
But just before he was supposed to testify about this to a Senate committee, the mob didn't want him to testify, and they killed him.
Did the government give the people involved in that conspiracy to kill Kennedy, did they lay off on them, or?
It was very interesting. You know, there was this Senate assassination committee in the late 1970s, and they had a tape of Carlos Marcella, who was the mob boss of New Orleans, talking to Jimmy Hoffa, who was head of the Teamsters, and both of them had been both persecuted and prosecuted by Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy had flown Carlos Marcella out of the country and dumped him in the jungles of Guatemala, and Carlos Marcella made his way back to New Orleans and said, "I'm going to kill that SOB," and Hoffa was always being prosecuted by Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy had something known as the Hoffa Squad, which was out to get Jimmy Hoffa for whatever reason they could. And the Assassinations Committee had a tape of Carlos Marcella talking to Jimmy Hoffa, and Jimmy Hoffa was saying, "We've got to kill Robert Kennedy." And Carlos Marcella says to him, "You don't kill a dog by chopping off its tail. You kill a dog by chopping off its head," namely John Kennedy.
Oh my God!
And so
Why did it was rumored that during the election, the presidential election, that there was a mobster in Chicago that actually helped the Kennedys.
yeah, Sam Giancana.
So why did Robert Kennedy turn on the mob?
No one understands that. They don't know. I mean, his father was very friendly with these guys, did business with these guys. They helped to get his son elected president, and then Robert Kennedy turns on all of these people.
And nobody knows the reason.
No. I mean, I don't know what the rational reason was. The only thing I can think of is that Robert Kennedy was a very strict, straightforward Catholic who really believed more than anyone else, more than any of the men in his family in the Catholic Church. And he had a very strong sense of right and wrong. And it was like he was trying to prove that how, whatever you heard about this family isn't true. I'm going to show you how anti-corruption and anti-mob we are.
And that's amazing that they would bite the hand that helped them or whatever.
I know.
It's crazy.
It is.
All right, so
anyway, the guy who created the RICO statute, who was the legal counsel to the Assassination Committee, said there is sufficient evidence, but not the kind of evidence you can bring into court, but sufficient evidence to believe that the mob conspired to kill the president. That was Robert Blakey, was his name.
I don't believe, my belief is that the mob didn't have anything to do with killing Kennedy, but I think the CIA and the FBI were involved. That's what I think. So,
Well, the CIA was involved with the mob in trying to kill Castro.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
all right. Okay, what about presently? What about Las Vegas now? Is it clean of mobsters?
Yeah, I mean, they don't own any casinos anymore, but they own businesses that are tangential to casinos, that they have to deal with companies that service the casinos. A lot of those companies are either outwardly controlled or secretly controlled by the mob. But in terms of the casinos being owned by the mob, no, eventually the banks realized that these were good investments. They weren't risky investments. And so when these large entrepreneurs came along to buy casinos, they were able to borrow all the money from banks, beginning with a guy named Jay Sarno, who bought Caesar's Palace and Circus, and then Kirk Kerkorian, who owned MGM Studios and built the MGM Grand, and then you had Steve Wynn, who opened the Wynn casinos and others, and then you had Sheldon Adelson. These guys weren't mobsters, and they weren't mob connected. And whereas the mob spent millions to build casinos, these guys spent billions. And what's extraordinary is that they've got a return on their investment, even though they spent tens of billions of dollars. They've earned 10 times that back already.
So the only difference in the beginning is that when the mob wanted to move in, when the gangsters wanted to move in, absolutely they couldn't get legitimate money.
No. And there were a couple of shady insurance companies in Arizona that lent money, but not enough to really build a casino. They would help
Only
finance.
because the people that had the money thought that casinos was a risky business.
Yeah, the banks, they thought the casinos were a risky business, and they thought dealing with gangsters would be a risky business because the gangsters wouldn't pay back the money.
What about, Las Vegas is famous for, beautiful hookers.
They're still there.
What?
They're still there. They've always been beautiful hookers in Las Vegas.
And the government just lets them be?
It's pretty much legal.
Oh, it's legal.
Prostitution is, well, not in Las Vegas Center, but outside of Las Vegas, prostitution is legal.
Did the mob put an arm on the prostitutes?
No, the mob used the prostitutes to encourage high rollers to continue gambling.
That's it.
I saw a familiar face walking on the avenue, both surprised by the way we looked. The years had changed us too. We smiled and both embraced like old friends often